I think we're in for a violent couple of years.
It's an ungovernable city.
People are exercising a lot of their rights to take it to the streets and get their voices heard.
Kids who are now shouting, globalize the Intifada.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
It is correct to resist in the face of genocide and colonialism.
And I don't give a damn if it's coming from one particular side or the other.
His crimes are the stuff of nightmares.
He hit all the buttons of the left.
They're glorifying him. They're making him into a hero.
People said to themselves, if I shoot this guy, I'm going to be iconic. When these protests started, and you started to see people taking over intersections, blocking 101, defacing buildings, looting stores, you could see that they were doing so on the prompt or the expectation that the city either wouldn't or couldn't do anything, and they were correct.
The reality is when you get a big group of people, there's going to be a certain segment of those that are not satisfied with the peaceful protest, that they mean it, that they want their voices to be heard, and when they feel like they aren't, they're going to escalate their means.
This violence that I've seen is disgusting. It's escalated now since the beginning of this incident.
People that are causing the problem are professional agitators, they're insurrectionists, they're bad people, they should be in jail.
When you have 1 million people there who are here illegally, and they know that there's no consequences to breaking the law and the immigration statutes don't exist, then you're going to get the logical culmination of that whole matrix is people are going to be waving the flag of the country that they don't want to go back to and burning and spitting on the flag of the country that they insist on staying upon. It's that kind of incoherent.
The standoff over military troops being deployed in California continues. The state's governor, Gavin Newsom, has repeatedly rejected federal intervention to deal with protests.
The police do policing. Military is for the battlefield.
You can argue that sending in the federal troops exacerbates it. You can take the point of view that it prevents it. We just don't know for sure because riots are complex. We know that without federal troops, we saw what happened after the George Floyd killing. We saw how much violence occurred. And so if the federal troops had not been sent in, the violence might have gotten worse.
California officials blame Trump's deployment of the Guard as the reason for the escalation.
It's an escalation that didn't have to happen. Why were there raids? You know, we had been told that he was going to go after violent criminals. It wasn't a drug den, it was a Home Depot.
And just that dynamic, that power dynamic of federal forces being used on civilians just creates an opportunity for a bigger clash than what originally started out as a protest.
Presidents for eons have sent in not only federal troops, but they've nationalized state guards. That's what George Wallace stood in 1962 in the door of the University of Alabama and said segregation forever, et cetera, and JFK said, you know what, I had just nationalized the National Guard of Alabama. It happens all the time.
We have a president who pushes the executive power to the limits of the Constitution. I don't personally believe he's exceeded those limits, but he's pushed them to the limits. He's not the first one to do it. Jefferson did it, Lincoln did it, Franklin Delano Roosevelt did it, and Donald Trump is doing it.
If you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Trump speaking at that rally, shot in the right ear.
The shooter, as well as at least one bystander, are dead.
The two attempts on President Trump could easily have been prevented, both instances of complete, total incompetence on the part of the Secret Service.
Another attempted assassination on the life of former President Trump. 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Routh, he's suspected of hiding in the bushes behind a fence at Trump's private golf course, armed with a high-powered rifle.
There was a general climate in the country that Donald Trump was Hitler, that he was a fascist, that he was Mussolini.
It is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist.
And it just lowered the bar of what was acceptable. And a lot of people came out of the woodwork and said to themselves, if I shoot this guy, I'm going to be iconic. I'm going to be remembered forever as a hero.
The Network Contagion Research Institute surveyed residents. The results found support for political violence against President Trump is growing, specifically within segments of the U.S. public.
I know people on Martha's Vineyard, who, if they had the opportunity to kill Donald Trump, probably would. They think he's Hitler. He brings out the worst in people, but I think that President Trump is probably the most divisive president in modern history. People who like him very, very strongly, and people who dislike him very strongly, and that raises the odds on presidential assassination attempts.
38% of total respondents said it would be somewhat justified to murder President Trump. Also 31% saying the exact same thing about Elon Musk. But for those self-identifying in that left group, those numbers grew to 48% and then also 55% respectively.
That's way too many. I mean, when you get that type of response of any type of political murder being justified. We've seen failed democracies fall subject to this type of rhetoric, and then you see their whole governments collapse because there's just no path forward. Once you get to that level, it's incredibly tough to come back from, if not impossible. But the reasons for why we see that are decades in the making. We have siloed ourselves on almost every single political front, even if we don't think of them as political fronts.
People are scared. They really are scared. There are people who honestly believe we're heading toward tyranny. There are people who are just deeply offended. They just hate the guy's guts. And there are people who just are irrational. They hear the word Trump and they can't see straight.
Daryl Paulson, a political expert, tells us violence breeds violence, and that's exactly what's happening across the nation.
It gets worse and worse unless there are people who come out and say, enough is enough.
And when people on one side see people on the other side take violent action, then it will feel like everything is fair game.
Speaker Melissa and her husband Mark were shot and killed early this morning in what appears to be a politically motivated assassination.
The suspect has been identified as 57-year-old Vance Luther Bolter.
It is no exaggeration to say that his crimes are the stuff of nightmares.
Investigators now say these haunting surveillance images you see behind me here show the murder suspect wearing a mask, police-style badge, and tactical vest as he approached the front door of Minnesota Democratic State Senator John Hoffman. Belter is accused of shooting and wounding Hoffman and his wife shortly before he shot and killed State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband.
A separate search of Bolter's vehicle uncovered a manifesto which included a hit list of people with ties to abortion rights and about 70 names of mostly Democratic politicians, reportedly including Governor Walz, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, and U.S. Senator Tina Smith.
The 57-year-old now faces both federal and state murder charges tonight.
All of these people have personal upheavals, they're mentally disturbed, their life doesn't go the way, they have a megalomaniac, narcissistic expectations of themselves, and when they don't, and he was in financial trouble, he was all over the map occupationally, he was mentally disturbed.
We attribute mental health issues to many terrorists and many people who are assassins. The same thing was true of almost all presidential assassins, because we don't want to admit that maybe they had a political reason for doing it.
I do think there's parameters like this. And within these parameters, there's legitimate and often hyped disagreement, rhetoric. And then outside the parameters, there's what I'd call the 2 or 3% of people who are mentally unstable. And they look at this interior field and then they intrude sometimes, and they mimic or they pick up different themes and they act on it. But it doesn't mean that they are reflecting that movement itself, except on one condition. If you lower the bar of acceptability, if you take a particular person and from the mainstream inside, it matters who says it.
Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged and unstable.
We must be stronger, more determined, and more committed to saving America than the MAGA Republicans are destroying America.
Political leaders should be held to a higher standard. Academic leaders, judicial leaders, all leaders, media leaders should be held to a higher standard. They should understand that they have followers, and their followers will sometimes misinterpret what they are saying, or will sometimes correctly interpret what they were saying.
MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people.
We pledge to you that we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
When we see this reflected not only in the rhetoric of the president, obviously, but in leaders of both parties, when you start to see the other side as the enemy, the opposition, calling them scum, it dehumanizes these people.
They embrace anger. They thrive on chaos. They live not in the light of truth, but in the shadow of lies.
The real threat is not from the radical right. The real threat is from the radical left. And it's growing every day, every single day.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within. Our threat is from within.
Luigi Mangione, the suspect in the fatal shooting of the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, in police custody, charged with second-degree murder, along with a slew of other gun and forgery charges in Pennsylvania and New York.
He hit all the buttons of the left. He was aristocratic and wealthy and tasteful and educated, and he was good-looking, and he mimicked or he claimed that he was a class warrior.
He had a handwritten manifesto that criticized the U.S. healthcare industry, which he claimed prioritized profit.
Look here, you see Mangione giving a farewell speech to classmates in 2016. He was the school's valedictorian.
The Wall Street Journal reports Mangione turned out to be a high-achieving product of elite schools, an affluent Ivy Leaguer who harbored anti-capitalist leanings that may have played a role. A review of his Reading Digest suggested that at some point his ideas about activism had crossed into an interest in violence.
The suspected United Healthcare CEO killer, Luigi Mangione, is cemented firmly in public conversation. Mangione has emerged in some circles as a sympathetic figure fighting the system.
Even if it was a small segment of the population defending that, a small segment's too many.
Taylor Renz had that interview and basically worshipped him.
If you support assassination of innocent people, are you lacking a conscience, a soul, and a heart? Simple question, go.
I believe that the assassination of innocent people, if we want to talk about the assassination of innocent people, I believe that the tens of thousands of Americans that die each year because of the lack of health insurance, that is, to me, a violence in itself. That is assassination.
The people that say, oh, you can't go around killing people in cold-blooded murder should probably take a look in the mirror.
The health insurance industry is oppressive to people. It is violent.
We have to fight for our lives on a phone.
Medical bill shouldn't be $450,000 a year.
Now we're talking about, are we defending murder rather than the dysfunction of the healthcare system? And to me, those are two very, very different fights, and one doesn't have any political solution, where the others, you at least have to go through a legitimate process to get the changes you want, even if they're not on the timeline that you wish they were.
Just a cold-blooded, horrible killing, and how people can like this guy is, that's a sickness, actually.
Wanted posters for other CEOs popped up in New York City. Self-described socialist clothing company Comrade Workwear says they're going to make playing cards of other most wanted CEOs.
Florida woman Brianna Boston may be the first copycat. She's been charged with allegedly calling a Blue Cross Blue Shield operator saying, "Delay, deny, depose. You people are next."
There are going to be copycats of that because they're glorifying him. They're making him into a hero. There's T-shirts. The same thing is going to be done with the killers in Washington, D.C. and in Boulder and all over the world.
Free Palestine! There was at least one party rolling around in flames.
Last night, we experienced an attack not just on our family, but on the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
What were you thinking on Sunday? Why did you do that?
Our people have been put through too much by that monster.
The attacker basically wasn't a fan of anybody. It's probably just a whack job.
Last night, we experienced an attack not just on our family, but on the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Terrifying moments for Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, his wife, and their 4 kids, and several family members as well.
He and his family were forced to leave their home in the overnight hours after an arson attack.
That fire attack happening just hours after a Passover dinner.
The suspect has been identified as 38-year-old Cody Balmer.
What were you thinking on Sunday? Why did you do that?
Police affidavit says Balmer said he harbored hatred for Shapiro and that he, quote, would have beaten the governor with a hammer if he had encountered him.
If this individual was trying to deter me from doing my job as your governor, rest assured I will find a way to work even harder.
The accused here, Cody Balmer, told 911 operators that he targeted the governor in part because of Shapiro's views on the war in Gaza.
911, what's the address of the emergency? Governor Josh Shapiro needs to know that Cody Balmer will not take part in his plans for what he wants to do to the Palestinian people. He needs to leave my family alone. He needs to get his eyes off of my daughters. And he needs to stop having my friends killed.
The attacker basically wasn't a fan of anybody. It's probably just a whack job. And certainly a thing like that cannot be allowed to happen.
You just go on TikTok and it's like Der Stürmer, the Nazi journal. Everything terrible that you can think of about Jews is on there. And when you have a Jewish governor, you're going to see it exacerbated.
Yet another attack targeting the Jewish community.
2 Israeli embassy staffers shot and killed last night outside the Capitol Jewish Museum.
The suspect leaving little doubt to his motive, yelling this as police took him away in handcuffs.
Free Palestine!
This type of violence is not okay.
What we're seeing is more violence now directed at Jews than since the Holocaust.
At least 8 people set on fire.
The suspect, 45-year-old Mohammed Solomon, who the government says was in the country illegally, now charged with a federal hate crime.
Police say he used Molotov cocktails and a makeshift flamethrower and screamed, "Kill all Zionist people" in the process.
It is clear that this is a targeted act of violence, and the FBI is investigating this as an act of terrorism.
Focus all of your attention, not 99%, 110% of your attention on left-wing anti-Semitism. That's the problem the Jewish community faces in the future. There is no right wing on college campuses. There is no right wing among the elite.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
The kids who are now shouting, globalize the Intifada and Palestinians will be free of Jews from the river to the sea, are our future leaders.
It was a week the University of Washington campus won't forget.
a pro-Palestinian protest group stormed a building, set fires, and kept control of a part of campus until police moved in and arrested more than 30 people. The university says the damage is over $1 million.
It is correct to resist in the face of genocide and colonialism. On October 7th, planted the seeds of revolution in the oppressed and toiling masses of the world.
Intersectionality is a fake academic discipline that basically says the world is divided into two groups, oppressors and oppressed, and Jews are the oppressors. And when you learn that, when you have ethnic departments that become incubators for anti-Semitism, then you understand why we've seen such horrible increases in anti-Semitism.
Due to the steadfast resistance of the brave fighters of Hamas and other resistance groups across the Arab world, we as all oppressed people should know that by now the violence is absolutely necessary.
This kind of violence is becoming far too common in our society. And I don't give a damn if it's coming from one particular side or the other, directed at one particular party or another, or one particular person or another. It is not okay. And it has to stop. We have to be better than this.
We all say it, everybody has to tone down the rhetoric, and that's true, but there was a political consensus on left and right that you could disagree, but there was the interest of the United States. The United States is changing demographically. We've never had in our history 16% of the population foreign-born, or 55 million people. And that comes at a time when nobody believes in civic education or the melting pot. And the result is that we haven't got people on the same page.
This is much worse than the Vietnam craziness. I was involved in the Vietnam War. I was a strong opponent of the war. I defended many people. But I also realized that some of my own clients, Kathy Boudin, turned from being a protester to being a murderer. The line is not difficult. If you believe that the government is doing something horrible, that the president is Hitler, the line between nonviolent protests to violent protests to picking up a gun or a bomb is one that's easily crossed for some people.
If we were having this conversation in 1971, there was a major terrorist act about every 2 days. But we didn't have this hair trigger 200 million people connected to each other with Facebook or Snapchat or all of these, Twitter, all of this, X.
Social media is the Wild West, and framers of the First Amendment had no idea how social media should be dealt with. We have to be very concerned about the misuses of the social media, misuses of the video and artificial intelligence to create fake scenarios that might incentivize violence.
We need to remember that if we want it to be different, then we are the consumer. They give us what they want, the same way that the bartender gives us exactly what we order. They don't just randomly tell us what to drink. And to me, a lot of this blame of social media is like blaming the bartender for the hangover that we asked for. Is the alcohol to blame? Yeah, at some level, but we're the ones ordering it too.